Centre Averil Power, 6 minutes.
6 minutes, thank you. And I welcome the Minister to the House. Minister, I want to start by welcoming, as other members have, some elements of the bill. I particularly welcome the retention of the 9% VAT rate. It's something that I had lobbied the Minister for Finance on throughout the year. And indeed an excellent campaign was put forward by the Restaurant Association of Ireland and other groups pointing out the business case for it, that in fact it was a tax reduction that has paid for itself and has supported employment, particularly in small businesses. It's a very labour and intensive industry, restaurants and the hospitality sector. So I was delighted to see that special 9% rate was retained in the budget. I welcome too the home renovation tax relief, although I would share comments that have been made by others about how it could be more comprehensive, particularly in respect of, I think it's too limited to restricted to just primary residences, where the person is actually living in the house themselves, the owners living there themselves. I think this is an opportunity, as indeed Senator Hayden and others said earlier, to improve rented housing stock as well. And I would ask the Minister to consider reviewing that at committee stage. Single parent tax credit, I'll speak on more detail at this at committee stage because we'll be tabling amendments specifically on this issue. I would share the concerns expressed by other members on both sides of the House. I think this is extremely regressive, this measure. I think it is in every child's interest to have the strongest possible relationship and the most contact possible with both parents, whether those parents are still living together, whether they're separated, or whether they're divorced, and whatever the circumstances of their relationship may be, whether they still have an amicable relationship or whether they've had to fight through the courts to reach agreements on things like access and custody. We should be doing everything possible to enable both parents to have contact and have a positive relationship with their children. But of course there are that can financially be difficult, because you end up in a situation where, in the case of separated parents, where they're now trying to run two homes on the same income that used to provide for one. And fathers in particular, and I've had emails from fathers from all over the country pointing out the impact that separation has had on their income after they pay for maintenance, and the little bit that they have left at the end to have accommodation that has enough rooms, has space to actually take their kids at the weekend, and to have a few bob to be able to take them out to the cinema or spend quality time with them. So I think we have to recognise that, of course, it is more expensive for parents to look after children separately than it is if they're a married couple. And I think it was appropriate that we had a tax credit that recognised that and gave them a bit of support, and I think it would be incredibly regressive to remove it. Personally, I prefer if we could go back, just leave the situation as it has been, because you recognise those extra costs, and I think that was appropriate. But at the very least, I hope that the Minister would accept amendments to ensure that at least the credit can be transferred, so that it's not just left with the primary carer, but that it can be used by the parent who has the bulk of the income, which in many cases will be the father. I mean, the primary carer at Trinity College has done research on Irish separation cases that shows that 97% of separation cases, the courts deem the mother to be the primary carer, even where there's 50-50% access, that they still deem the mother to be the primary carer. So I think restricting it to primary carers is regressive, and it should, at least the mother should be able to sign it over to the father if he's the person who's earning the most money to use it, or at least allow for it to be shared, although I can see difficulties in sharing it, particularly where the relationship isn't an amicable one between the parents. And I just think this whole thing is unnecessarily messy and regressive, and ask that it be re-looked at. Another amendment that we'll be putting down at committee stage relates to physiotherapy referrals. It's an issue we raised last year, that we feel that people should be able to get tax relief on physiotherapy services. If they self-refer, they shouldn't have to go through a GP to get tax relief on physio. They don't on other medical services. We'll be retabling that again at committee stage. And we raised this issue earlier on in the year on the finance bill. Minister Noonan gave a commitment that he would look at it for the budget, but it hasn't been brought forward by the government itself, so we would ask you to look at that again at committee stage. And then finally, just on the issue of VAT, as I said at the start, I welcome the 9% VAT rate, but I think there's a need for a fundamental reform of our VAT rates. Senator Riley mentioned the fact that there's no VAT on oral contraceptives, but there is on non-oral contraceptives. There's lots of other illogical examples, like the fact that there's no VAT on many high-fat, unhealthy processed foods, but we pay 23% on bottles bottled water. There's no VAT on limousine rental, but you pay 23% on walking sticks. There's 9% on lap dancing, with 23% on marriage counselling, and indeed there's no VAT on. There's no VAT on. The Minister can give his views on that. The Minister can give his views on that in his response.
You're a mind of information, Senator.
I won't ask the Minister for his knowledge of that.
You'll have to come and work for the bank.
And indeed, there's no VAT on textbooks, but there is on there's 23% on e-books, which of course just reflects the fact that at the time that these rules were agreed and that the EU legislation was put in place, we didn't have e-books. But surely it's time now for that to be reviewed. And I know this issue has been raised repeatedly in this House and next door. I'm on the Education Committee. We discuss it every time we discuss school costs, cost of books, cost of uniforms. Again, you're seeing schools trying to get around that by moving towards greater use of e-books, and yet they're actually more expensive often than textbooks. But I mean, repeatedly the answer that we get is that the government is tied into the EU regime on this, which of course is true. But what I'd like to know is what we're doing to challenge that and to ask for it to be reformed. Are we putting forward initiatives at European level to have the VAT rule? I think it's beyond time that that was done. Right across the continent. So I'd ask the Minister to take that up, either in his current capacity or in any future capacity that he might have that might be more relevant to that issue. Thank you.